on reparations, the Pan-African Conference on reparations in Nigeria, but it was in '93 when we were in court, and we could not attend Abiola's conference. But they did include our work, Professor Scobie's work, and they did include the Albany speech. In this document, the first Pan-African Conference on reparations in Abuja, Nigeria. So we have some of this material available for you outside. It'll help us with the legal struggle. It'll help us with our struggle at City College. It'll help you master and empower yourself with information that you need. Without further ado, the brother who has made it possible for me to stand strong. One side, I got my brother Small, spiritual extension. Other side, I got my physical brother Marlon, born of the same womb with my mother. With these two brothers, I can't lose. We are on a winning, triumphant path. Brother Small. Brother, the sign-in sheet was circulated. We need it. Bring it back, please. Make sure everybody has signed it. Asante sign.
Hotep. Be the land. No justice. No peace. Today I'm to talk to you a little bit about post-slavery trauma syndrome, but first let me greet Queen Mother Moore, Sister Blakely, Brother Mary. I know Sister African left, but just out of respect, Brother Chuckway, good to see you. See my buddy Coltrane walked in. It's always good to be in the world of Coltrane, and she kind of lifted me up with a lot of old memories. And it's good to be in the presence of all of you. Sister Hoover, who enlightened me a lot, and I certainly want to see the document you have because we would like to deal with that question in New York State. This question of post-slavery trauma syndrome is not a mystery to us. All of us suffer from it. I suffer from it. All of you suffer from it. We know that post means that which comes after. We know that slavery was a system of genocide that inflicted upon us some great harm and trauma. And we know that that trauma is continuous, and thus we call it a syndrome. And so we want to speak on it, thinking in terms of three critical areas, the first being economic, the second being politics, and the third being culture. And we know that in the last few years, as consumers, we've been spending upwards of $300 billion with our savings and investments. We're talking about $400 billion, making the African in North America one of the wealthiest nations in the world. However, we've come by this capital. We have been spending this capital. We know that politically we have produced miracles after miracle. No people in our condition have been able to do in the short period of time we have done what we've done in a hostile, terrorist state where we have gained control of at least political offices within its system, as well as to produce a protest political movement against that system and also an underground revolutionary movement within that system. And we've caused more changes with our actions in the Constitution of the United States than any other force and any other people in this country. And we have defined their document for freedom in ways that it has produced more human articles or human amendments than any other persons, including those who framed the documents. So we know we've got the political skills and we've got the political promise. That third one we've got a big problem with, culture. Oh, there's been so much confusion around that question, the question of culture. I remember in the 60s where I stood. Then I was very young and just a little security officer with Ella Collins and OAU and working close with Veda and Lumumba brothers who were in the leadership of the Panther Party at the time, and other brothers in other formations that may not do well to mention because their function was a little different. I remember we were called sometimes when we did our servicing cultural nationalists. And those who in the public knew Africa, when you were initiating how we should dress and how we should discuss and the kind of things we should do and how valuable culture was, you remember the stigma other people struggling put on us. And many of us thought that to be about culture after a while was a negative. We had confused the motive force for our political and economic behavior in such a way that we then put on the motor that which we were fighting so that our political and economic behavior profited them and not us who were doing the fighting. So when I say post-slavery trauma syndrome, I'm talking about the behaviors, the attitudes, the beliefs, the rituals, the kind of cultural determinants that we were forced to pick up during the period of physical incarceration and change. We are still incarcerated. We are still enslaved. We are still prisoners of war. And actually, we should identify ourselves only as refugees because technically, under any international jurisprudence, we are refugees or prisoners of war. When we realized the tools we had to pick up psychologically, socially, politically, the kind of personality and attitudes we had to form, the kind of relationships we had to build, brother to brother, brother to sister, sister to sister, children to parents, parents to children, those little nuances and norms we had to develop to survive the cracker, to fool him, to mislead him, to survive to the next day. Many of those things, as well as the things that was put in our personality out of fear and terror and the trauma of the acts of fear, of terror that inflict fear on us, the physical act, the kind of things put into us as a result of that kind of terrorism. I mean by things in our habits and behaviors. I mean, when I was growing up on Acadia Plantation in Georgetown, South Carolina, and Mama would give me an extra beating or an extra slap if I was caught holding a conversation with somebody white. Now, there was two ways to take that. One, that they didn't like white people, which was quite true. And so they didn't want us talking to these people, which was quite true. But what was more true, they were trying to mold our behavior so that we stayed away from white folks because we knew the traditions of young African teenage males especially being found dead in the river, killed in the woods, lynched side the roads. Those who had these special relationships with white folks would almost always end up in these traumatic or fatal situations. So what our parents had to do is inflict fear on us and force us to quell certain kinds of behaviors that should be normal for any growing human being. But in order to keep us alive, they had to inflict this fear. Unfortunately now, because we haven't told our story well and we haven't passed our history on, we still have the fear, we still have the negative reaction, and do not have the necessary political aggressive behavior to do the work we need to do, but we've forgotten why we got into this situation where this fear is so deeply rooted in us that we can't act out liberation activity in terms of our everyday movements. So Mama was trying to save me. But this is another time now. This is not a time for me